Hello, my name is Joseph Werner. I'm an occupational therapist and I'm the owner of Child and Family Consultants, which is a facility in Melbourne where we have occupational speech therapists and mental health counselors that work with children and families dealing with autism spectrum disorder and other special needs. And I'd like to take a few minutes now to talk to you about a subject which comes up all the time, which is problem behaviors and how do we deal with problem behaviors. Well, to start off with, it's important to remember that all of us sometimes make mistakes. We all have our cranky moments. We all make errors in judgment from time to time. Sometimes we say the wrong thing. Sometimes we don't express our emotions the right way. So those aren't necessarily problem behaviors in the sense that they don't really necessarily interfere with our daily relationships and our ability to learn. And when we talk about kids having problem behaviors, that's really what we're looking at. Kids whose difficulties in their behavior are really hindering their ability to make connections socially with friends, that are causing disruptions in families, that are causing kids to have tantrums at home or at school. And sometimes the problem behaviors even lead to aggressiveness. Sometimes that aggressiveness is out at others, and sometimes that aggressiveness can even be self-injurious. And we never want to see those kinds of behaviors, especially the aggressiveness and the self-injurious behavior. If you do have a child who's demonstrating and expressing continuous difficulties with these types of behaviors, then you first want to bring it to the attention of your pediatrician, because every once in a while there's a medical explanation that might help explain why these problems are happening. Another potential issue is even kids can have anxiety or depression, which can lead to a lot of these types of behaviors too. Anxiety and depression can eventually lead to isolation or even to rages. Again, there may be medical considerations that need to be addressed in order to help both the child suffer less and help the parents suffer less. But the only way to know is to address the medical issues. When the medical issues have been ruled out, then that's a time when a lot of the kids are referred to occupational therapists, speech therapists, mental health counselors, and other people with a background in how to help first families and sometimes the kids themselves understand where the problem behaviors are coming from. And that's the first thing I'd like to tell you, that problem behaviors, whether it's tantrums or biting or spitting, they all have a cause. Sometimes it's not so easy to figure out what the cause is. And that's where, again, some professionals might be able to help you tease out where the problems are. But there's always a cause. And besides the cause, there's usually a trigger. And that trigger can be everything from the child feeling overwhelmed from a sensory standpoint, or it can be the way somebody says something to them, or it can be the fact that they're just fatigued. An important thing to remember about kids with special needs and kids who fall on the autistic spectrum range is that in reality, they probably have to put more effort and time into managing their bodies and trying to understand their world than typical kids do. A typical child can make it through the school day fairly automatically. They don't have to pay as much attention to perhaps the loud sounds, or they don't have to worry so much about somebody touching them unexpectedly, or they may be able to comprehend what both teachers and friends are saying to them much easier during the course of the day. Or a typical kid might not have to pay quite so much time and attention to the fact that their bodies just want to move when they're supposed to be sitting, right? But kids with special needs, kids with autism, attention deficit disorder, other mental health difficulties, these kids are actually spending much more of their day trying to manage and figure out how to make it in the world. So by the time they get through the middle of the school day, or perhaps even getting home from school, the kids are really just tired. They've been fatigued from all of that mental energy that it's taken to get through the day. And sometimes what we see as the problem behaviors is actually an expression of the fact that the kids are just tired and overwhelmed, and we're just asking them to do one more thing. Asking a child who, say, has a learning disability of some sort to work in school for 6 hours a day, or to be learning through the internet 6 hours a day, and then having them sit down to do another half hour, hour of math homework. Sometimes the kids just can't make that mental shift over. Now, how do we figure out where these problem behaviors are coming from? Well, the best people who understand where the behaviors are coming from are actually you, the parents. You are with the kids more time than anybody else. You see them in their different moods. You see them at different times of the day. So the best resource for finding out where problems might be coming from is really with the parents. So looking at the patterns of the child's behavior is really critical. You know, when do they tend to get upset? What do they do when they are upset? When do they seem to get disappointed or frustrated? Because most problem behaviors are going to have some emotional link to it. Kids don't just fall down on the floor and start screaming. That comes after they've either gotten frustrated, disappointed, overwhelmed, embarrassed. One of these emotions is going to come first. As a matter of fact, anger is actually usually considered a secondary emotion because something always comes before anger. The frustration, the disappointment, the embarrassment usually comes first, and then that develops into anger. And then sometimes it's the anger which then leads to aggressiveness or even rage. So parents are the best resource for trying to help determine, you know, where the patterns of a child's behavior are, when they might be getting upset, how they might be getting upset. Parents are also the best resource in terms of figuring out, well, what has worked in the past? Has anything worked? Has it helped to talk to the child? Has it helped to give the child some space? Has it helped to put on some soothing music? You know, what has worked in the past? Whatever has worked in the past, whatever has reaching the child is probably a technique that you want to continue to use into the future. As I was saying before, we also want to respect the fact that all kids have to make it in the world. If you are very sensory sensitive and really can't deal with a lot of the smells, the sights, even the tastes and the sounds going on around you, well, it would make sense that you'd want to stay in your comfort zone. You'd want to stay only in the situations where you feel most comfortable. Along with that, you'd probably want to control things as much as possible too, because if you're in control, then maybe you're not going to feel quite so overwhelmed, or you're not going to be put in a situation which puts you out of your comfort zone. So a lot of difficulties that kids have in terms of problem behaviors come from their trying to keep themselves in their comfort zone and trying to be able to stay comfortable and healthy where they are, and not put themselves into situations where they're going to be uncomfortable or feel stressed. And that gets to another point that I'd like to make, is that a lot of times problem behaviors are a mismatch. The child's sensory abilities, or maybe even their intellectual skills, don't match up with the expectations that adults and teachers are trying to get them to do. When the cognitive load of the homework or the academics, or the social load of being out on the playground, or the sensory load of hearing all kinds of unexpected sounds and dealing with unexpected touches, when that gets to be too much, kids are going to give you some type of signal. Sometimes the signal is that they run away. Sometimes the signal is that they get silly. Sometimes the the signal is that they start getting loud or restless. But they'll always give you a signal first. If you can identify that signal, then sometimes you can find a way to talk to the child or take them out of the situation before things erupt into more of a tantrum. So knowing your child's signals is really being important. But the child's ability to regulate themselves, to deal with this mismatch, sometimes is what we want to try to help the kids be able to learn. But remember that a lot of the problem behaviors come because the kids are being expected to do more than they're able to do at that point in time, or some kids just have a limited ability to adapt. They can adapt within this range, but at school or at home in the community, we're asking them to adapt at this range. And when that happens, then you get a mismatch. And again, kids, particularly kids who maybe don't have a lot of words to express themselves or don't know how to use words to express themselves, well, they're going to use actions. Because what the child is thinking is that I'm uncomfortable and you should be able to see I'm uncomfortable and you're not doing anything or helping me to be less uncomfortable, so therefore I'm going to do something to get your attention or to do something even louder or stronger to make sure you know, and then you have to relate to me because I'm not feeling good and I'm not comfortable or I'm not feeling safe in this situation. So when we see these problem behaviors, yeah, they may be things that we want to change, we want to help the kids get through, but remember there's always a cause. And what could be the triggers that came just before that led to the child feeling overwhelmed or uncomfortable or stressed, or maybe just increased their sense of anxiety to the point where they didn't know how to regulate that. Another important thing to remember is that we tend to like to believe that kids are always able to control themselves. But if you have a high activity level, if you have distractibility, those are internal things. And your mind is telling you that something over there is really going to be a lot of fun, and it's a lot more fun than sitting here at the table. Or my body just feels like it's got to move, because if I'm sitting still, then my body just doesn't feel good. And these kids with a high activity level, although we're constantly trying to remind them to pay attention, sit still, and so forth, they really may not be able to do it. Sometimes for kids with high activity levels, we really have to make sure that we give them plenty of opportunities to run and jump and get that physical exertion through the course of a day. There's a lot of kids who have attention deficit disorder that actually do better doing what's sometimes called a miracle mile before they get to school. They walk or run around the track for a mile. Gives them that physical activity, that exertion at the beginning of the day. And then their attention systems are more ready to sit down in a class and listen and pay attention, at least for a while. So we want to make sure that we understand that kids don't always have as much control over their behavior as we'd like to believe that they have. And we have to take that into consideration too. So one other important topic that I want to talk about in terms of problem behaviors is that how important it is to be able to teach kids to be able to take their feelings and to be able to put them into words. If kids can put their feelings into words, not only can they tell you what it is that they're feeling so that you as a parent might be able to understand where they're coming from and then be able to help them with that, but just the process of putting feelings into words tends to dampen down the strong feelings that kids are going to have. Now, kids with autism spectrum disorder, it's the nature of the diagnosis that they have difficulties with communication and with social interactions. And if you have problems with communication and social interactions, you're probably going to have problems identifying feelings in your own body and being able to label those feelings, put them into words. You'll also probably have a difficulty observing and understanding feelings in others, and even a higher level skill like taking somebody else's point of view when it comes to different situations. So one of the best things to do is to help kids understand feeling words and be able to label things in terms of feeling words, mad, scared, happy, silly, excited. If we can use those words all the time with kids and get them to use those words, they're going to realize that they're going to be able to diffuse a lot of their strong emotions. Okay, and one of the best ways to do this is, first of all, parents have to model emotions. Parents have to be able to sometimes, even in front of their child, say, "Boy, I was angry at that, but you know, this is what I did and I made things better," or "I was really sad by this, but I was able to get a hug from somebody and that made me feel better." If parents can model the use of feelings and the expression of feelings, then that will really be the best way to teach kids that feelings are important and that feelings are a way to resolve difficulties. And because when you keep feelings inside, that always leads to trouble in one way or another. It's also important to validate feelings that kids have. So if you see your child is angry or sad, use those feeling words. Say to them, "Boy, you look like you're angry," or "I can see you're mad because your blocks fell down," or "I can see that you're upset because your brother took your toy," or "you didn't want to share the toy with the other child." And use those words so that you know you're validating the child's feelings. Now, the child still might have to make a transition and they still might have to share, but it's important for the child to know that you respect and understand what they were feeling at that time. A lot of children's rage often comes from the fact that parents are telling them, "Well, you shouldn't feel angry about this," or "You shouldn't feel upset just because your brother wanted to share your toy." Well, that in a way that might be true, but it doesn't help the child really deal with the situation that's in front of them, the fact that their bodies automatically have gotten upset or frustrated about the experience that just happened in front of them. If you can help the child be comfortable with their feelings and you validate, you know what they're feeling, then you can have the child be able to move on from that. The last thing about problem behaviors too is that's important to recognize is that a lot of problem behaviors stem from other factors besides different diagnoses. When kids are exposed to poverty, neglect, abuse, when they have to deal with violence in their homes or their neighborhoods, when they see drug abuse and other bad behaviors from other people, all of those things can lead to kids having problem behaviors. Sometimes those types of situations are called ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And the more adverse childhood experiences a child has, the more likely they are not only to develop problem behaviors as youngsters, but problem behaviors into teenage years and even into adulthood. And those problem behaviors actually can even manifest themselves later on in life with things like diabetes and high blood pressure and lead to other problems like substance abuse. So there's a lot of potential reasons why kids have problem behaviors, and it's important to be able to first identify them and then come up with ways of trying to figure out how do I communicate better with the child, and then how do I be able to help my child through the problem behaviors so they can interact and learn and communicate the way that we'd like them to.